welcome to my YouTube channel, The Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder. I am honored to bring on my dear friend and international medium, psychic, and spiritual teacher, Glenn Dove. For those of you who do not know me, I am the author of The Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder, as well as Life After Breath. And here I have my own YouTube platform, which is now being broadcasted to several other channels. But before I bring in Glenn, I just wanted to share one quote with you that I know my dear friend Glenn embodies every day of his life. Pablo Picasso once said that the meaning of life is really to find your gift, and the purpose of it is to give it to others. Glenn is someone who has many gifts. He is an internationally known psychic medium. He does hypnosis, past life regression, he does numerology, he does a lot of guest lectures, and he is someone throughout the several decades has been a top-tier respected medium. To me, in many eyes, he's certainly on the Mount Rushmore of spiritual teachers and mediums throughout the time, but he is a very humble, approachable, nice guy, and of course, he's handsome. Glenn, thank you for coming on and joining me, your family, as I and many others know. But today I'm going to have a beginner's mind and talk to you as if this is our first time meeting you, because every day, as we know, we are a different being. We change. Certainly, you've relocated to Florida. I know we still feel you in New York, but, you know, this is an honor of a lifetime to call you soul family and to hear and learn from you, you know, during our session today and our time today.
Oh, thank you so much. You know, it's funny, I'm listening to you because I do so many of these podcasts and stuff. And, you know, remember, I've been a musician for about 57 years, I guess, or close to it. Yeah. And I've had notoriety and fame with that. So there are people that know me in that world and don't know I do this. There are people in this world that don't know I do that. And, you know, like somebody the other day that happened, they saw me, I was, you know, in when I was doing the Ram Jam tour and they had seen something and they're like, wait a second, is it the same Glenn Dove? Yeah, it is. Which is an interconnecting story we can get into later, how I actually got into doing the sessions because of my music career, how they brought me together with this.
The intersect of music and spirituality.
Yeah, it's actually an interesting story. This is 1978, I think it was. I was playing in a Long Island club band doing the Long Island circuit. In those days, Long Island was a hotbed for musicians, Twisted Sister and all the bands. And I was working about 5 nights a week. And I got a phone call that I want to come to the studio. And I kept blowing the guy off because the guy that called me wasn't somebody I really, you know, thought much of. Finally, this other guy picks up the phone and says, no, you have to come down. We need you. So I show up at this recording studio in Great Neck. And I had done some tracks and they asked me to stay on as like a studio guy. So this is a dream. I go to work, maybe 10, 11 o'clock in the morning, you know, show up at the studio, hang out all afternoon, you know, to whatever time. Weekends we were off and they would give me like a check to be there. And there was a band called Ram Jam and they had a song called Black Betty, which was a very popular song. Yes. And the drummer, Peter, comes walking in with a cane. And it's like, I hadn't known him. And what happened? So I was in an accident. I fractured my hip. Meanwhile, there was a tour that was booked. So they looked at me and they said, you know, did you want the job? You know, Ram Jam is going to be going out for the next year or two. And it's like, okay. So basically like a week later, I was handed plane tickets and like get all these songs down, learn everything. My gear was already there, packed up. And that was it. And I went out with Ram Jam and I did touring about a year or two with them. We came back and we formed a band called Speedway Boulevard. Wow. We weren't really Ram Jam anymore because so many musicians had turned, changed, and left. So it was a new entity. So we renamed it and we re-signed with Epic Records with CBS, did an album, got rave reviews. The other day I was going through some photo albums and I found Billboard's Picks and Plays, which is they look at new albums. And it was Linda Ronstadt, Pete Townsend, REO Speedwagon, Speedway. So, I mean, the list of people that were on there were all big stars. And so everything was great. And we were having issues with the record label trying to get promotion because they really, you know, these labels, they don't want to know from you. You know, you're on Epic Records, CBS. Well, now you're competing with your idols, you know, Paul McCartney, let's say, or Michael Jackson. They're all on the same label. So anyway, the album came out and we had a 1 year with 4 1-year options contract. And the first year was up, and the album had just come out. So they had to decide whether they were going to pick up our contract for the next year, which means do another album. And my management said, no, make the decision now. They wanted us to wait 3 months. And then they said, okay. And when they dropped us. So here I am in this band with a wonderful album, just came out, and the record label dropped us.
Wow.
So we're scrambling to figure out where we're going to go. And there was a member, I say he was a member of the band, Michael Earls. Michael was our engineer. When we were on tour, he was our road manager, and he was like a brother to me. And he was really part of the band. I think he even might have co-written one of the songs. And when he wasn't with us, we were still on salary. He was working as an engineer at a club in Long Island. And he called me up and he said, I'm working those days. The bars were open until like 3 a.m. He says, I'll be coming home. I said, okay, I'll meet you for breakfast. And he was coming home on Meadowbrook Parkway, coming on to Southern State, where he had an accident, I think 6 months earlier on this turn, but he survived. He was in a car and he was in an accident. He survived. 6 months later, give or take, I may be off my timing, in the same place on the same turn on his motorcycle, he died.
Wow.
So I just freaked out. And in those days, there was a psychic who's still around, George Anderson, who used to go on the Joel Martin radio show. And he was on one night, and my mom got through, and Mike came through. And then somebody I knew had gone to George for a reading. They didn't even know me. And Michael came through in their reading, called out to me, gave my name, and said, give him this message. So I got an appointment. And I went in and I expected to hear
with George Anderson.
With George, yes. I got an appointment. Yeah. Somebody gave me an appointment. They had one. And I went in expecting to hear from Michael. And he brings up, who's Glenn? And I said, there's no Glens in my family. And he said, great uncle. Well, announced to me, my father had a great uncle through marriage that died before I was born. It turns out that I was actually named after him. And he was bringing up like relatives of mine that I never heard of. And I came home and I was kind of like a little frustrated. But meanwhile, my girlfriend had walked in after me and he came through. I went back about 6 months later and doing what people do to me. It was like the disguise, I went in like with a shirt and tie. I never wear a shirt and tie,
Yeah.
And I had my hair pulled back because it was really, really long.
Yeah.
And a pair of glasses on. George didn't even look at me. He just sat down and said, oh, you're a musician. And I looked and I said, yeah. And I think we were going to, I don't remember if I was going to Europe to do the next, something was coming up. I think there was another band that was supposed to go to England and record another album. And he says, oh, you're going to be doing what I do. And I'm like, are you a musician? And he said, no, I'm a psychic. And I said, are you crazy? He said, no, you're going to be doing this. And I'm like, do you understand? I play, it's all I do. I play drums. He said, no, you're going to be doing this. And right after that, a tarot reader, somebody I knew, my mom was going to see a tarot reader with some girlfriends. And I drove her to the house and she goes in and I'm outside reading the newspaper and she waves and she goes, the woman needs 5 people and one of the other girls didn't show up. So we're going to have you come in and have a reading. And I'm like, are you kidding me? And I came in, I sat down and the lady looked at me and I never told this time. And she just freaked out. And she said, you're going to be doing this. And I said, okay, give me a lesson. You don't need a lesson. As I get home, my mother said, it's amazing. She goes, I have a deck of tarot cards in the house. So a buddy of mine was sitting there and she hands me the cards and I'm fooling around and I'm shuffling the cards. And my mother's reading the instructions. True story. And it says, shuffle the cards and then the person will ask a question but not tell the reader and you're going to throw the cards out. I had no idea what I was doing. We're all joking around. And my friend goes, okay, I got the question in my head. And I'm making jokes and I'm throwing the cards down. And I look down and my mother says, obviously, this is about your book, because my friend was trying to write a book at the time. And I look down laughing and all of a sudden I get this horribly sad feeling. And I looked down and my demeanor changed and I went, no. I said, I see sadness and I see a broken heart and I see crying and everybody stopped laughing. And I looked up at him and I went, this is crazy. And he looked at me and went in his pocket and pulled out a wedding ring. And he said, my wedding has been broken off yesterday. Nobody knows. And I was like, uh-oh. I called the lady and she said, I'll give you one lesson. And she came over and she gave me a lesson. And the next day my phone rang and someone said, gee, her name was Millie. She can't take me today. She's overbooked. Could you take me? And I went, what? And they said, could you read for me? And right, I don't know how I did it. I put the phone under my shoulder. I took out the cards and I did a reading. I hung the phone. 10 minutes later, the phone rang. They said, Millie gave me your number. She can't take me. She's overbooked today. And that week, I think I did 4 or 5 readings. And it and then what happened was, and I tell people this, I remember a woman named Maddie, I think it was Maddie Berkowitz, I remember. But she came in for a reading, and I sat down, and I never forget, and this reading is vivid in my mind, and it had to be 45 years ago. I threw the cards down, and I said, oh, you're selling your house? And she said, yes. And I said, I see an accountant who's helping you. And she goes, oh. I said, his name is Howard. First time I ever got a name. And she looked at me and I said, he's an accountant. And she says, my son's name is Howard. He's an accountant. I said, he's helping you. She said, my son passed away. And I looked down and I said, there's another guy helping you named Bernie. And she goes, Bernie's my husband. He passed away. And I realized at that moment, I started getting the family.
That it was a mediumistic ability that you had.
Yeah, well, I had... The story that I mean has probably been in so many books, which is how this all started. I mean, we got to go back. I was 1955. I'm born 1959, I think. I had a hernia, go into the hospital for an operation, and I was running a fever. So like an infection. So they kept me an extra day or two. They released me. They brought me home. They can remember, no internet, no, baby intercoms. My mother said, you're going to stay in your brother's room. And if you don't feel good, you wake up your brother. So I'm laying in bed, and all of a sudden I wake up, and there's a man standing in my room with long hair and a beard. You know the story. Wow. And he looked at me, and he was speaking to me, and he was telling me things that my grandfather, who I called Poppy, who was like the most important person in my life, was going to be going away. And he was giving me all these messages, and he had long hair and a beard and like a robe. And the next day, I woke up and I said to my mother, there was a man in the room last night. I said, Grandpa's going to be going somewhere. And I said, he had long hair and a beard and a robe. My mother's looking at me. And a short time after that, I was playing in the yard, and I came running in the house, and my mother was opening up a gift. She had received a painting or a picture called, I think it was called The Son of Man. It was a painting of Jesus. Now, we weren't a religious family. I mean, at that age, I was probably 3 or 4, so I wasn't in any religious instructions. I don't think we even I was going to church at that point, anything like that. And anyway, I walked past, as I came running through the kitchen, I looked at the picture, and I went, oh, there he is. And she said, what? And I said, that's the man that was in my room.
Wow.
And she said, are you sure? And in the late 50s, early 60s, Look magazine and Life magazine were very big. They used to be these big magazines. And she went and got a copy with Fidel Castro on the cover. And she said, was this the man? And I went, no. And she got like Smith Brothers cough drops. You see these two guys? Because she was going for the beard. Wow. I said, no. And she was showing me pictures of men with beards. And I kept saying that was him. And then shortly after that, about a year or so later, my grandfather got lung cancer and died. Wow. And started coming to me. And then it was just all out. I would get up in the morning and say, Grandpa was here last night. Grandma's moving. And this is going to happen in, I don't know when I was, maybe 3rd grade, 6, 7, 8 years old. And it would happen. And then I got frightened of it. It scared me. So my mom had gone to a medium, and I have the tape. This is really weird. When we moved from New York to Florida, I found the reel-to-reel tape. I had to get it transferred to like digital. And she went to this woman who was of the White Brotherhood, and she said, there were 2 boys, one's artistic and one is Mr. Rhythm. Now, I didn't start playing drums till after my grandfather died. I started playing drums in 1964. And she says, watch his feet when he sleeps. And she said to my mother that I had this gift, but not to push me, that it would develop naturally. So it frightened me. And my mom would have conversations with me. And to make the story even crazier, to go back a little bit more, to really preface this whole thing, my mom's brother, it's so weird that these stories are coming in, but you have to get the whole picture. My mom had a brother, and he and his wife, his mother-in-law, had sent my mother some books. My mom had 3 miscarriages and then had my brother, and the doctor said, count your blessings, you survived. So anyway, her brother and his wife sent my mother these books: Jess Stern, Edgar Casey, Ruth Montgomery. This is back in 1950, I guess 1954.
Before it was cool, like it
yeah,
is
yeah. I was going to just
today.
say, so my mother's reading this and laughing, going, "Oh, what is this crap?" Allah,
right.
And she's making a joke. So anyway, my uncle was back about a week or so later, and my mother goes, "Oh my God, this is amazing!" And she joined the Edgar Casey Foundation in 1954. Then after that, she said she had a dream that she was going to have a girl, and she said to my father, "We're going to have a girl. Let's try again." He goes, "No, you lost 3 babies. You almost died having our 1 son. I can't take a chance." She says, "No, it's okay." Gets pregnant with no problems. While she's pregnant, waiting, she has a vision of a boy, and she said, "This is ridiculous. I'm having a girl." And lo and behold, so she was being prepared, I guess, because when I came along, those books were sitting on the shelf in the hallway in the little house I grew up in Queens.
Wow.
And it was like the hallway. My father made a bookshelf. And I remember going down. It was Jess Stern, Edgar Casey, some of spiritual books, Emmett Fox, who is I love Emmett Fox's stuff. And I never liked reading books. And one night I was having some problems. I was just going through some like panic attacks, which I didn't know what they were. Now we know what they are. And I grabbed a book, and I don't know what made me grab it. And I pulled it off the shelf, and I was very young. And I walked in my room, and as it fell open, the chapter was called Worrying.
Wow.
And the book was The Power of Positive Thinking, Norman Vincent Peale. And I looked down and I read the chapter. And as I read it, in front of me in black and white was the solution to what I was worried about, which was nothing. And I always used to say, "You're going to tell me something, black and white, baby. Let me see it in black and white."
Kind of like ask and you shall receive.
Right. And there it was exactly in front of me in black and white. Wow. I put the book down. I read it from front to cover. And that started my journey. Then, of course, as I grew up and I became a musician, I went, with the readings and everything. And then from listening to the Joel Martin radio show, there was Joel Martin used to be on. He had different guests. He had a psychic astrologer, and so I went to the astrologer also, and the Hindu astrologer, and he had prescribed this diet to go on, and it was pretty much like an Edgar Casey diet, something very extreme. So that was probably around 19. I don't know.
Was this like a pescatarian when you started with vegetarian stuff?
Well, he told me to cut out red meat, not even chicken and fish. And he says, and then over the next year, slowly you can cut chicken out. At one point, I was a vegan, and this is going back way before it was cool, probably 84. It was very hard to survive because what do you eat? So I've gone back to dairy and fish. So I haven't had meat since 1980 or 81, 82, whatever. And so I do have fish. But he had told me about different things to do, dieting and stuff like that. And then he mentioned a gem prescription. And it isn't like wearing a crystal around your neck. It was like, get a 2-carat, golden imperial topaz, wear that for 6 months, then wear this astrological bracelet. So I said, "What is this about?" And he said, "Just do it." So then his assistant said, "Go read the autobiography of a yogi." And I said, I don't read that Indian craziness. So I was in Quest Books in Manhattan at 240 East 53rd. I don't know if it's still there. And I'm looking at a book rack, and then through the rack, like just the way like I'm eyeing like books on the back shelf, and I see this face, and I look at it, and I felt I was being drawn towards it. And the book was called Scientific Healing Affirmations. And I'm like, no, I don't read that weird Swami yogi stuff. I'm a Catholic boy or whatever. So anyway, I leave. And I have my list that he told me to get the foods, like, sprouted bread. And, it was the whole thing, all the vitamins and everything. And I'm at the health food store out in Long Island, and I'm buying everything. And I'm on the checkout line, my typical no patience at that time. And I always say to myself, why do the people at work here, they're so slow? And, and I'm sitting there spinning the book rack, and the kids picking up the item for the woman in front of me and going, click. And I'm like, oh my God, come on. And I'm spinning the book rack, and the book rack comes to a stop. And right in front of me is that man's face again. But this time, instead of saying Scientific Healing Affirmations, it said Autobiography of a Yogi. And I got off the line, And I looked at the book and I went right to the back in the glossary and I looked up gems, jewels, and it said Outwitting the Stars. And I read the chapter right there in the store. And I went home and I read the book from front to cover. And I went back and I bought every copy that was in the store. And I started giving it to everybody. Now, I had no idea that George Harrison used to do this. He used to give everybody a copy. And if you know, Steve Jobs, when he died, everybody at his funeral got a gift.
Wow.
They all got a copy of Autobiography of a Yogi. They were all given a box. If you went to Steve Jobs' funeral, I believe they were given a box. And when they opened it, it was that book, because that was the only book that Steve Jobs had on his iPhone.
Wow.
Yeah, and George,
and
I've heard George Harrison speak about it. If you look at the cover of Sergeant Pepper, of course, there is a picture of Yogananda and his teacher Sri Yukteswar and Babaji. I don't know if Lahiri Mahashai is on there. I didn't even realize. I had no idea, So that started to come in, and I started to follow some of Yogananda's teachings. And it was an interesting story. I don't know if I've ever really put this out publicly. I was doing a meditation, and all of a sudden, I'm on this grass, and there was some slate in the grass, like slates you could walk on. And I was standing with Yogananda. And there was another man who was standing next to him. And then there was a cliff, and there was the ocean. And then to the left was this little house. And we were walking, and I was like crying or sobbing. Like, I don't know, there was such joy of standing there with him. Now, mind you, I'm a Catholic kid. I was not into any of this. And I could feel his hair like blowing against me.
Wow.
I could smell, like, when you eat, if I eat curry or if I eat a certain food, sometimes your body emits the odor. And it wasn't a bad thing, but I could smell his body. Right. And he tapped my arm and smiled and said, "It's going to be okay. I'll come to you Christmas Day, first thing Christmas Day." And with that, I wake up and I'm thinking, what a weird dream. So it was right near the holidays. So a friend of mine and I went to see my brother on Christmas Eve, and we exchanged gifts. And then I was going to my girlfriend's house to see her family. And then she was going to come back home with me and spend Christmas Eve at my house, because we were going to celebrate Christmas Day. So we get to her house, and everybody's drinking and having a good time. And her mother goes, "Gift time." Now, my friend who was with me, we've already given each other our gifts at my brother's house. So everybody's giving gifts, and my girlfriend was getting her gift in the morning. And I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden, my friend leans over and says, "Oh, I have to give you something." And he hands me this little piece of paper. It looked like, bubble gum when you used to get baseball cards. If you ever, like you get 5 baseball cards and a piece of bubble gum and a little wrapper. It was about that big. Now, one thing about me, and you'll notice, is I'm OCD. I've gotten better over the years. I've worked on it. I used to wear a Casio calculator watch, and it always had to be the exact time. So I would call the time maybe once every 3 or 4 days and set the watch so that the seconds were correct. Because the watch used to run about 10 seconds a month fast. So
I'm the same way. I needed, when I was a kid, I needed to line up my alarm clock.
Exactly. Yeah, everything had to be lined up.
I don't know what that is. Yeah.
To this day, thank God, everything like now, like my, my Google stuff, it all changes automatically. So anyway, I set it. So now, Christmas Eve, mind you. So we're sitting there, and I said, "What did he?" I go, "We gave our gifts before." She says, "Oh no, I'm sorry, I meant to give you this before." So we're talking, and I rip a piece of paper, and I just see this burgundy, looks like a book. And as I turned my hand over, I looked at my watch, and it went 12:01. It is 12:01, which means it is now Christmas Day. It's not Christmas Eve any longer, because it's 12:01 a.m. And I ripped the rest of the paper up, and it says, "The Law of Success, Paramahansa Yogananda."
Oh my!
And I open it up, and I look at his picture, and I run out of the door, and I start crying. And I'm like, emotionally, I can't control myself. And I'm thinking, this is insane. How could this be happening to me? I'm a normal person. And when I kept thinking he was coming to me Christmas Eve, I didn't think Christmas Day, like I'm expecting a dream, but there it was in the book. And of course, to this day, I probably go through that book. Well, I now have it on audio, and I ride my bicycle 3 to 4 times a week. And when I'm out for an hour and a half, I listen to that. I probably go through that book every once a week. But it was interesting. And so that was a big influence. And then, doing the readings. The readings had started. I never wanted to do this. All I ever wanted to do was be a drummer. And that's still that's what I'm really into. People say, what are you doing? I go, yeah, my passion.
Well, it's interesting because when I know that you and John Edward, work together with Infinite Quest, and we'll get into that, but it kind of seems there's a lot of parallels where he, I guess, was a teenager, and I believe it was Lydia Clark who came to a house party for John and kind of read his cards and said, "You're going to be doing this," and he's just like, he had the similar reaction to you where he was, and when I see you and I see John, I almost feel like I'm looking at a similar person.
Well, this is funny because John has a way of pushing you out of your comfort zone, and you do as well. And this is really funny because I can remember we met, and without telling people the background to our story, when how we know each other, but he would push me to go on and live and things like that. And
he's a go-getter.
And he really I was never, and I'm the opposite of John, but he had pushed me to go on, like, do these live readings on Infinite Quest. And I remember the first time I did it, I was like, I'm sitting there in front of these screens, and they're like, okay, screen number 1, England, and you do, it's 2:00. And after the first week, I was like, oh man, this was great. And then, of course, I went on rotation. I used to do that. So I have to, give him a thanks because I haven't spoken to him for a long time, but he always was very, very nice with me.
To try to get you out. I have a question. I know you and I have a lot of parallels in a sense that we were connecting to spirit at a very young age. I had my NDE. You had your connections. Right. I believe 4 years old. We're seeing, interdimensional communication, living in Astoria, Queens, right? So I'm wondering, there's a lot of parents, I'm sure, who are listening to us, and they may have that child who's gifted. What kind of or tuned in, like what kind of recommendations would you give going through all that you went through for that parent?
For me, you're talking the 1950s, early 60s.
It's a different ballgame.
Oh, now, you turn on TV and Family Guy is making jokes about John. Now psychic mediums and stuff, it's just like when you start seeing comedy skits about, you reached it. Allow them, don't try to control them. Coach them, encourage them. Don't get me wrong, you don't want somebody going off and being wild, but my mom always supported me. And as I moved along, she didn't push me with it, but if I sat down and said I had this experience, they didn't think I was crazy. And I was lucky to have my parents because back in those days, even when I started, imagine somebody saying, what do you do for a living? If I said, I talk to dead people, they look at you.
It's so,
there's so much out there now. You can go into stores, just stores that carry, spiritual books now. There wasn't anything like that. There was one little section in a little local bookstore that might carry something. So there's so much out there now, and there's so many people that have told their stories that it's easier for them. It's almost like in music when I'd be listening to records and trying to figure out what that drummer did, or I'd look at a picture of him. Well, now you go on YouTube and you go on the guy's website and he tells you what he had for breakfast, what he was feeling that morning, what instrument he was playing, how he played that part, how he holds his drumsticks. Excuse me. So everything now is so accessible with videos and YouTube. So they can pretty much research or quote Google anything they want to. It's accessible with it.
So I think the biggest takeaway is really just allowing your kid to unfold and not like non-interference and listening and understanding, which really means taking yourself and putting yourself under.
And not pushing it either. Like you might have some overzealous parents who want to be like, oh, I want my kid to be a medium. No, like let them, they might go so far and then back out of it. So just let them be who they are. You give them the tools they need and just develop it that way.
Right.
But obviously I encourage everyone to spend a few moments a day meditating or being still.
getting
and
quiet.
it's
Yeah.
yeah, we just moved down and we're down here. Actually, July is going to be 2 years, but we waited to put our pool in, and we just had it done. Matter of fact, they put the water in yesterday.
Feels like
And
just a day ago. I remember you
yeah,
guys moving and you becoming the Florida man, and I just couldn't believe. I
yeah.
thought this was a vacation. I mean,
My,
you are New York in a nutshell in some ways. In other ways, you have your own, but you are born and raised here.
born in Queen and born in Astoria. Then I lived in Rosedale, and then obviously moved out to Nassau County.
Yeah.
And just yesterday, the water was in the pool. And matter of fact, I think as I'm speaking, I sort of chuckled that they're starting to shock the water now because they said you can go in tomorrow. Yeah, but I went out yesterday, and down here they put a big cage in your backyard. So I have this almost like a house that's over the pool. And I just went out and I find it, and I'm on the water too. So I find that I just sit. And it's like I'm just staring at the water and just sit. And sometimes I just lose it. I just can sit there and relax. I do Kriya yoga. And when people hear the word yoga, they think it's asanas and hatha yoga. Hatha yoga is something else. It's just as great. It's postures. Kriya yoga is a breathing technique where you bring the breath up through the spine. And I usually do my Kriya yoga breathing as well. So I try to do that. I don't want to sound like coining a phrase, but I always say life is a meditation. I will go through the whole day and my mind is just on spirit. People have no idea. I could be out at a party. I could be playing a gig, and I'm giving gratitude that I'm sitting there. And I don't usually say this because it's not something I need to be, it's just, you always wonder what people think, like people, their minds, what's going on. And I'm just trying to get to that point that I can have that stillness. So it's so crucial because especially in the last few years, something that I've come to understand for so long, I always looked for something outside of me. And even though I've read 100,000 million books and I've read these statements my whole life, it ever happened where like you go back and you reread something that you've read when you were a child and then you finally get it. And I may have told you this, a girl I used to date, she had an uncle, her dad's brother. And she said, my Uncle Richard's coming over. And I was going home. I was probably like 20 years old and she might have been 19. And I remember getting in the car. Well, and he pulled up and he got out of the car and he had long hair and a beard and a robe. And I'm like looking at this guy. And this is like in the 70s, like maybe 73. Like, wow, weird kind of guy. So I get home and I call her. And we had house phones. We didn't have cell phones. And I said to her, how's your uncle doing? She goes, good. I said, like your dad's an attorney and he always wears a shirt, tie, and your brother's in the. And I'm like, wow, like, what is this guy doing? She goes, well, he was a Harvard professor and he went to India. And I'm like, I just didn't get it in those days. And she goes, he changed his name. And I said, well, does he give advice? I didn't know if he was spiritual. I said, what does he think of Jesus? She goes, what did I know? In those days, and she asked him and he turned back and I guess he said to her, he was a great, prophet. And I said, well, does he have any advice? And she said, yeah, he said to just be.
Oh.
And I didn't know what that meant. And she says, I said, and so you call him Richard? She goes, well, no, his name is Ramdas. That's the name that he goes by. And I'm like, oh, okay, whatever. Little did I know. I mean,
Well, my cousin Gene in Arizona is a major student of Ramdas. So I'm hoping you are listening to that story from Glenn.
Yeah, it was cute. He actually sent me a copy of the Gita, real quick. Wow. Her dad was I had connected with her again some years later. We hadn't seen each other. I was married and divorced, had my boys, and she turned out that she lived in the neighborhood. And her dad was going to Hawaii because he used to live right by Wayne Dyer. They all lived in Maui.
Right.
Yeah, and so I guess her dad must have said something. So he sent me back a copy of the Gita and he signed it to you. So to this day, I got that copy of the Bhagavad Gita. But but there's a case where all that information was right in front of me, but I just didn't speak that language in those days. And it took me 20, 30, 40 years to get it. But the point I was getting at, and this is something that I tell everybody, and I just constantly give you this, is you, and I just, it's like a realization. You don't get there by adding content or by reaching out for something. And I was always like, it's the next book. Eckhart Tolle speaks about this. He makes a joke like, you come to this seminar and then I'm going to find enlightenment. Then it's when this one's, I'm going to that one next week. And like, you know, you're chasing this book and that book. And then I realized that this source, which everything comes from and everything goes back to, obviously it can't change and it doesn't grow. So it has to be everything. And it doesn't have to think. And the point is, and the analogy I use in all my sessions with people is, if you go to the movies and you want to change the movie, you don't walk up to the screen with a brush and scrub the screen. You can't change. If you're watching there was a story, I think Evan Fox mentioned it, where in the old days in the out west, they were starting to have movies, and they would go from town to town and set up a tent and they would show the old movies. And these are like, you know, miners and stuff out in the rural area. And one of the scenes, the bad guy has got the girl and he's tying her down to the train track. And the guy pulls out his gun and he shoots the screen, you know, and everybody starts laughing. Well, now think about it. You know, he's shooting the screen. If he really wanted to make a difference, obviously it didn't do anything. He would have went back and stopped the projector. So if you want to stop what you see on the screen, remember, first of all, that it's the film you have to change. And if you take the film down, there's one beam of light. That beam of light projected that whole movie. I hadn't been to the movies since, oh God, COVID. And we've been down here. Oh, my watch is talking. So anyway, we went to see, we went to see Maverick, Top Gun, and I'm sitting in the movie theater watching the planes go up and down and the explosions going off, and I just turn around and I look and I just see this beam of light coming out of the wall and going onto the screen. And on the screen, you know, Tom Cruise is doing whirlies and swirlies in the bar, and I'm turning around and just seeing this beam of light. The whole movie, every action, every word, good guys, bad guys, happy, sad, whatever, the grass, the wind, is all being projected by one bulb. Now, are you going to blame the bulb for the happiness, for Godzilla eating somebody? For some? No, because what you have to realize is, and this is the exercise I tell people to do, I say, get a flashlight, and look at me, go turn it on, aim it towards the wall, and put your thumb in front of it. And what do you see on the wall? You see a thumb. Turn your hand upside down, you see a thumb down. Put two fingers up, you see a peace sign. You could be vows, you know, disgusting and put one finger down. Yeah. Okay, right. Now, you just saw a foul gesture, a peace sign, and you could get so used to watching it that you're forgetting that it's your hand that's creating it. It's not the bulb. The bulb is the source that everything comes from, and you're blocking it with your hand, thus creating shadow. So the way I see it is, we're enlightened and we think. And by thinking, you're putting it as it comes through the, you know, the medulla oblongata, and it comes out, this energy. Your thought is like a piece of film that goes in front of the bulb, and the bulb just shines and it goes through that thought and it illuminates that. So the outer world, I consider the shadow world. Thus, if you want to change it, you change that consciousness. So you don't become anything, you already are. It's a rainy day. Well, the sun is out. It's just that the clouds are blocking it. So you are this enlightened being, and by different actions that you do, you're just wiping away the mud. If you had a beautiful, you know, shiny piece of gold and it was all full of dirt or mud, and you keep polishing it, as you polish it, you all of a sudden, you know, you take the final swipe and it starts to glow. Well, it was glowing the whole time. It was just underneath all the mud. It didn't become that. So you actually are enlightened and you don't realize it. And then, of course, what we come to realize is that there's only one beam of light. This is where it gets weird, which means we're all one. We're all being broadcast by that same light. So our source, it's one. It's the consciousness that separates itself with ego. You know, so and it's something that I probably have read this stuff many years ago, but never got it. And then, you know, like anything else, one day you go, why did I watch that movie, or did I reread that book, and did I not see that 20 years ago when I read it? It's like anything else, you weren't ready for it. So you have to go through the lesson is ready, the
student. Yeah.
Yep.
It almost reminds me of Plato's allegory, The Cave. If you're familiar, when he talked about the light behind the prisoners, and it's, you know, that could be a reference to a near-death experience, which Plato, you know, referred to, but it's really getting out of the shackles and recognizing all the shadows and experience.
Yeah, that's all they saw with the shadows.
But I think Wayne Dyer, I know you mentioned him, he would say just a lot of people have to be cognizant at the direction that they're facing. If you're facing outward, you're bound to, and that's your reality, you're bound to have a lot of problems. But if you're turning within, you're bound to have a lot more clarity and solutions. But why is it, do you think, that so much of the world lives outside in versus inside out? Where did that
It's
start? How did
well,
that
and
develop?
it's the fall of man. I mean, there's biblical stories and stuff like that, but you have to realize we live in this material universe where people base it on if you have this, you've arrived. And how many of us, you could see the room I'm sitting in right now, being a drummer. I think it's 9 drum sets. I have one on order.
Wow.
I have about 9 or 10 drum sets in here, and they're all on shelving. And when I go to work, I come in, it's like Mission Impossible. What weapons am I taking tonight? I take the blue set. And it's like, well, I just got to get one more set. They said to my wife, I want to get this one more. And she looks at me like, as if that's going to satisfy me. If I only had that car, if I only had that house, if I only had those shoes, if I had that shirt, if I had that diamond. And we see people who obtain those things are movie stars. And they have, I was Rod Stewart, was doing an interview with Katie Couric. And they were driving in one of his Lamborghinis or Ferraris. And they pull into this garage, and it's like 5 or 6 car garage or something, loaded with Bentleys and Lamborghinis and stuff. And then they walk in the house and they're talking. Then you're in the room, and I thought that they were in a store in Rodeo Drive, because it's like a wall of white shirts and shoes and suits, and he's walking through this room, and I'm like, wow, that's like a nice clothing store. And you realize it's his dressing room in his house.
Wow.
And then they're outside, and she says, well, you have this mansion. And he goes, yes, and then I have a house like this in England, and I have another house. And he had like 3 mansions like this, maybe one. I don't know where the other one was, Scotland, whatever it was. Anyway. And they're sitting down, and she's like, okay, well, you have 6 Ferraris and, this, and you have this beautiful wife, and this is like his 3rd or 4th, Victoria's Secret model, whatever. He's always got a beautiful model wife. He's got wonderful children. Got all these different kids with all these different women. You've had, 175,000 albums you've sold, and she's going through a success. And it's just amazing what this man has done. And she turns and she goes, so you're there. And what does he say? No, I don't know. Like, I'm not there yet. I don't know. There's something else.
There's something missing. Yeah.
Right. So it's good that he's looking for something. And as Eckhart says, but he's looking where it can't be found. It's not one more car. It's not one more kid. It's not one more house. It's not another sold out platinum tour. You're there you're already there when you start.
Right.
And all
They're
you can do
looking
is
for
store it up.
abundance outside versus themselves as the abundant source and their connection to that light.
Right. Well, listen, there's the light.
Reference.
The light is on, and you start to put something in front of it, and you see something. So now you want to find the source, and you put something else in front of it, and you're constantly throwing things in front of it to find what? To find the light that was there in the first place that you started with. So that goes back to that's the story of man. We keep thinking this is why, unfortunately, society is based on TV shows of the Kardashians, where they're housewives of. Now, I've never seen any of those shows, but I flipping it, like they're promoting. So many of these young kids feel like I have to have this brand shoe. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I might enjoy a nice car or something, but people always feel like if I owned that or if I had that, I'm going to be something. And then they get it and they're not there. Wow. Because again, so they're looking where it can't be found. Nothing wrong with having
those things. Yeah.
But the test is if it was all gone tomorrow, and Deepak speaks about this in 7 Spiritual Laws. Like if you have it and if your success, your title is because you're the president of a company, of American Express, and you lose the job and you're nobody, then it was objective referral. He explains it in that sense, where if you're really secure with yourself, whether you had that $1 million or not, whether you're living in the shack in the Himalayas in the cave, or whether you're living, it doesn't matter. That's it. So then you could have it, but if it comes, and it will go, because let's face it, we met when we were up in the Buddhist temple. People should know the story.
By Woodstock. Yeah. And in our interview, when I'm introducing you, I asked one of my producers to share that photo, because it was just crazy, because I saw on Facebook that you shared, I'm here. And I'm like, Glenn, I'm right down the block. And then,
well, they got to
bang,
understand what that is, because you're going up a mountain road.
yeah.
And the reason the Buddhists used to put their temples at the high altitudes, well, the warriors in those days, when they would be attacked, the atmosphere is thinner, and the soldiers that would try to attack them would lose their breath going up because those altitudes are very high.
Wow.
So they would always build their temples up like that. So here I am at this temple, and you pull in.
I would go there all the time. That place, the issue now, I don't think they allow visitors since.
I don't. Yeah,
we've tried a couple times, but that place has an energy.
Well, and it's funny because I was speaking to one of the monks one day, and we were talking about things, and he said, we got talking about, like, passing and stuff, and he said, and I've heard this said before by monks, he said, think about it today as you're leaving here and you're going downtown to Woodstock downtown, as you're driving home. Everybody you see on the road today will be dead in the next 100 years. Think about the next 150s. Everybody listening to this right now is going to be gone in 150 years or 100 years, because people do make 100. Matter of fact, when I used to start my lectures, I like to make people uncomfortable. I have the whole audience, and I look out and I go, look to your left, look to your right, look behind you and in front of you. And maybe it's 50 people or 100 or whatever. And I'll say, one person in this room is going to die first out of all of us. And, oh, this gets people crazed. I mean, just think, I want you to think about that for a second. One of you, maybe it's today, maybe it's in 10 years from now, but one of you is going to be the first person to die. And somebody in this room is going to outlive everybody in this room. They'll be the last person. Now, it doesn't mean the youngest, because you can have a young person die. And it brings this reality. It brings you back. It shocks you back into reality. That this is what, so we just come in here for an experience, and people often ask, why do we come back? The reason you come back is try to tell somebody what it's like to eat a certain food. I've seen people say to me, oh, I know what it's like to have kids. My sister has children and I babysit. I go, no, you don't know what it's like. Maybe you know what it's like to babysit, but you have to be married to understand what marriage is all about. You have to have children to go through that. It's like me going to a bar mitzvah.
It's the experiential reality.
Well,
because we have the knowing inside of us. But we could talk about a swimming pool until we're blue in the face, but till you're actually in that pool, we don't know really.
They have to taste the food. That's
it. Like
I go to the buffet table and I'm saying the pasta is good. You have to go up and taste it. You can't just take my word for it. Well, as my son,
well, we know about that food. Yeah.
Right. And I was joking because I just said to him, I said, how's it feel? You're married now. Yeah. Now, of course, he's been with her for a long time. Right. And they lived together. I go, but it's different, isn't it? And he goes, yeah. So now he's experienced it. So you need to go through the experience. And so we come back, and we're another analogy I use all the time is we're all actors on Broadway. And I've seen Nathan Lane and Matthew Broderick in The Odd Couple and The Producers and that Broadway show. I've seen Nathan Lane in The Addams Family. So all you do is you play a role and you act it out. And that it gives you, it makes you use your acting skills. Maybe I'm going to do a serious movie. Maybe I'm going to do a comedy play. Maybe I'm going to do an action one. And each one gives you the experience. What happens is while we're acting, you want to still be aware of who you really are, and you're watching yourself act, and that's great. So you watch yourself go through the moves. But many of us get absorbed in the role that we're playing, and we think that I'm Glenn Dove and you're Jake.
Is that would you say that's the ego that
exactly
that construct?
And we start relating to the outer, and therefore I think so. Then when on the play where the person gets into an argument or they're struck by somebody, they're in pain and they're taking it personally. It's just a Broadway show, but they don't realize that because they're taking it personally. Now, the play has to run its courses. I use the analogy, the roller coaster. The roller coaster has to run its course. There's two ways you can do it. You can get on the roller coaster and go up and down, and there's the woos, or you could stand on the platform and let the roller coaster go. And you can watch it. Either way, it's got to run its course. So when we go through this experience by just being and by witnessing it, but if you take part of it, you start thinking, I am that person. That's where the delusion comes in. And then you're going to have pains and pleasures. And what people don't realize is you can't have pleasure without pain. A team cannot win a game unless somebody walks away a loser.
Mm.
So if somebody says that this team's going to win, somebody has to lose in order for that team to win. You can't have a winner without a loser. You can't have tall without right. Tall, short, ugly, beautiful, happy, sad. You know, so that's the yin and yang. And so as soon as you say one word or you do one thing in this world, the second you do it, there has to be an opposite to what you just did in order for it to exist. Nothing can exist without an opposite, except for the supreme, which is just that's it. And so it's and you can't get there by thinking, and it's a bit crazy. I think when you have the experiences that you have too, the near death has always fascinated me, because people who don't believe, it's like you sort of walked off the stage and went into the dressing room and you saw everybody and you came back again. Because that's what happens when you walk off the stage. Everybody's in the dressing room, and then you see Ant and so, and you meet everybody, and you're like, "Oh my God!" And then, no, it's time for you to go back. Or when we're all done with the play, we decide to do another play, and this time I play a different character. But that's always fascinated me, because you're being given a glimpse, and are there any accidents? You know, so it's interesting when you have those experiences. I've seen people who don't believe anything, and of course have the experience that you had. And it transforms their life.
I saw a beautiful segment on Infinite Quest with you where you were describing the afterlife, and it was kind of like one bridge going on to the next one. I'm wondering for you, you connect to the afterlife every day, you know, with talking to, you know, loved ones. For those of you who just are not sure, like, what is the afterlife to you? Does this life have anything to do with that? And if you're connecting with it, is there like a longing? I know your life is great and we're not talking suicide, but sometimes is there like a longing almost, you know, to be there? Do you need to die to get there?
The people that I've spoken to describe it in such beauty that, I mean, how do you describe to somebody a sound or a color that's beyond the frequency of anything we know? Well, people right away, if I say, okay, it's a certain, like you hear a dog whistle. How do we know what that whistle sounds like? A dog will perk up. We're thinking it's just a high-pitched sound. How do we know it's not a wavering sound? So they talk about colors and frequencies that are beyond our comprehension. Well, I'm like, well, how can that be? We have a spectrum, we have sound, and they're like, no, it's beyond that. And our ears just don't hear those octaves of frequencies. Many years ago, if you ever read the book, and I highly recommend people read Life in the World Unseen.
Life After Breath.
After Breath, well, that, of course. That's a must in the new one. But there's a book called Life in the World Unseen by Anthony Borgia. He must be a medium. There's actually about 3 or 4 books written by him. And a priest has died. His name was Robert Monsignor Benson, I believe. And he was, I guess, sort of against what this is because he was a priest anyway, but he had some psychic ability, and he dies. And he gets over there and realizes, oh my God, did I screw up? I'm going to fix this. And of course, how does he fix it? But by writing a book. Well, he wrote a few books. Ironically, if my mom had gotten a trilogy of books written, Life in the World Unseen, more about Life in the World Unseen, Here and Hereafter. I think when I was born, she had these books around. They were definitely written in the 50s. I found a website called Ghost Circle. If you just Google the words Ghost Circle, ghostcircle.com. There's some free downloads, some books. I think it's a British website. And Anthony Borgia's books are there. And you have to read Life in the World Unseen first. And I think it's more about Life in the World Unseen. But the priest who this really wrote the book from the other side, it's a cute story because he starts explaining, like, where do you go? What's it like? Do you go to the bathroom? Do you sleep? Is there religion? All of those questions that we would ask ourselves. And even in that book, you realize he's trying to describe something that's beyond the range of what we can come. And I think when I saw What Dreams May Come with Robin Williams, it's and I have it on DVD because there's an alternate ending to that.
Very underrated metaphysical movie. And
people don't realize there's an alternate ending to the movie. In the movie, he just, they go over and they come back together. You see 2 little kids like sharing a sandwich. But there's an alternate ending on the DVD. You could choose it. And the ending is the wife, and you're watching it, and it's a soundstage. You can see there's no backdrop. There's like a blue screen, and they're acting out the scene, and they left this raw footage there. And the guy says to his wife, you got to go back because you took your life. and you only got to go back for 25 years. And Robin Williams goes, well, I want to go back with you. He goes, well, we figured as much, but he goes, it's only going to be 25 years. Let it go. And he goes, I want to go back. He goes, okay, but if you go back, you got to stay until you're 65. Did you want to do that? And he goes, okay. And he goes, okay, you're going to be born in Philadelphia, and she's going to be born in Sri Lanka. And they're sitting, and like they're standing, and he says to her, you're going to be traveling right before college. I forget exactly what the scene was, but it's like you're going to be taking a trip to Indonesia or wherever it was, and you're going to meet her and fall madly in love, and you're going to spend, you know, your time together until she dies at 25. And he goes, okay. And then the next scene, you see two babies being born, and it's a split screen, and they're at a hospital in Philadelphia and a hospital in like, you know, Indonesia, wherever it is. And, you know, Robin Williams, the baby is crying, and then she is not breathing, and they go, get the doctor quickly, the baby's not breathing. And I'm watching this going, how could the baby die? She's got to survive until she's 25. And the doctor comes in and turns the baby upside down and smacks her on the ass, and she starts crying, and the mother's holding the baby and patting her, and I'm thinking, Mom, you're losing her in 25 years. It's already in the script. So when we come in, we have a script, just like an actor or an actress has a script that's laid out, right? And you interpret, but there's certain things that have to happen. I don't know if your near-death experience is in that. Maybe it is, and maybe that experience caused you to do what you're doing now and enlighten all these people and reach out to me and help me quite a lot, because you kind of got me out of my comfort zone. You know,
well, that's what it's. You know, I think sometimes we forget that we're all on the same team, and certainly living in our country. I always think when it comes to spirituality, people say that there's a certain limit on the pie of abundance that we could all eat, and sometimes we just forget that. But it's for everyone to enjoy, and sometimes we put capitalism on spirituality, and it's not.
Well, look at what Wayne Dyer used to say. Wayne used to say, if you go to the ocean with a thimble and you dip it in, no matter how many times you dip it in, you come up with a thimble full of water. Somebody else takes a 10-gallon bucket and they dip it in, and they get 10 gallons. And then, you know, Oprah's there with a big oil truck, and she's filling that, you know, 600-pound oil truck. It doesn't matter. It's infinite amount. Or it's like, imagine we're all sitting in the ocean together, and you put your arms out and say, this is my space right here. Matter of fact, this is my space. And somebody else goes, well, this is my space. And think of how silly that would be, because it's just infinite water, but we're trying to box it off. And that's what it is. This is all one, it's only one energy, one vibration.
Don't you find it like hilarious? Like I guess this spurred my out-of-body experience in my earlier 20s, but I started laughing hysterically at the illusion that so many people live their lives by. And it wasn't just laughter. I was laughing with every cell of my body. My whole being was just squeezed out like a towel. But I don't know if you ever just kind of sit back with just how people have such attachment to the things that are just a cultural myth that we've been taught. You know.
Oh, it's amazing, and it's not okay, well, I'm enlightened. It's not that. You do get it, and I see some people sometimes so stressed over those things, and I guess I did the same thing at certain points. And it's just that same idea it's all of the attachment, and that's something that through all ages and many religions they always speak about non-attachment. But it goes back to saying just be, and if you could just still yourself with it. Also, the time frame. You know, I tell the story all the time. What's time? And every year, I haven't since COVID, but I used to go to California to the NAMM show, which is the music convention. You know, and sometimes I'd go with my son Brandon, and sometimes Sherry would go with me, and and you know, we'd go out and we have a routine. So anyway, so I'm in my room in the morning, and my phone goes off. My iPhone goes off. It's my alarm, and I hit it. Now the iPhone gives you 9 minutes of snooze. I can't change that. I wish I could. I'd like to make it 10 because I'm OCD, and I like to have an even number. Anyway, so I woke up one morning, and absolutely true story. And my alarm goes off, and I hit it, and I rolled over and went back to sleep. So let's say it took me a minute to doze back to sleep. So now that alarm is going to go off in 8 minutes. I'm having a dream, and we're on a plane, and we're going to California, and we land in Long Beach, because usually Sherry and I will fly to Long Beach. It's not as wacky as LAX. And we have our routine. We get our rented car. We go to Trader Joe's. We buy some food for the room. We stopped at a restaurant on the way back and had dinner. And I remember looking at the menu and picking it up, and it was like a laminated menu. And I'm a fish eater, and they had monkfish, and I love monkfish. And it comes usually in a medallion. Because the fish is a long round fish, and when they cut it up. So I said, oh my God, they got monkfish. So I had that, and her and I were having this great conversation, and she was going to go get a massage the next day, and I was going to go to, then we were going to go down to Joshua Tree. I said, well, let me go to the show for 2 days, and we'll go down to San Diego. I was going to go down to Ensenada. That's, which is another story. So anyway, we finished, and I said, I'm going to have some cheesecake. And she's like, we're going to be out for dinner every night this week. You can call the dessert tonight. You don't need it. I said, okay. So we get back to the hotel, and as we open the door, I'm in my bedroom back home. And all of a sudden, my alarm is going off. And I walk over to the nightstand, and I hit the phone, and I wake up, and my iPhone is going off. That was 8 minutes. And I could tell you the conversation at dinner, because we were talking about making plans. I could tell you word for word, that conversation was an hour long. And yet that whole dream happened in 8 minutes in our time. Wow. So time is relative. It's
timeless. On the other side, there is no such thing.
Right. And people can't grasp that.
It's like dividing air, like we do over here. You just get, and it's funny how we categorize air, but when you're on the other side, you recognize the illusion. But not only that, but an understanding of all is well, was well, will be well. Because as Lao Tzu would say, if we're living in the past, we're prone to sadness, to future anxiety. But in the moment, we have to trust. And for you, you've lived a life of flow and trust, and that's led to
not always, but it did lead to that.
You must have been born under like a full moon, because it like everything just seems to flow with you.
It has. I have to
really
admit, it has. Flow. It's interesting. When I was saying, when we were on that particular trip, it's funny to bring this conversation full circle. We were driving down to San Diego, then we were going to Joshua Tree. So I had already been, when we were out there at the time before, I wanted to go to the Lake Shrine, which is Yogananda has. It's called the Lake Shrine. It's right near Santa Monica. And we went there, and I was so excited, and I'm walking around this lake, and it's a little, and I was looking for that place where I saw him. And it was beautiful, and I had a spiritual experience, but that wasn't it. So anyway, one of the other trips, Sherry and I were out there. We're going to Joshua Tree, and I said, there's a self-realization temple in San Diego, I think, and there's one in Ensenada. We'll stop at the Ensenada one before we get to Joshua Tree. So we stop. We find it, and we get out of the car, and I walk up these steps, and I'm standing on this area looking down a cliff down at the ocean. And all of a sudden, I walk over, and there's a gate that says, "Do not open beyond this point." Well, the gardeners were working, and the gate was open, so I acted like, well, if it's open. And I walked up, and I saw some hedges, and I looked over, and there was the scene where I was walking. There was the grass with the slates, and there was the building. And I said to the guy, the guard came walking up, and I said, "Can I?" He goes, "No, I'm sorry. That's residents. That's where the residents live." And I picked up my phone, and I was like holding it over the bushes to get a shot. And that was the place that I saw him. It was exactly as I saw it in a dream. And to make this even crazy, we talk about time. After I had that dream, well, whatever you want to call it, that vision, about 6 months later, I was sitting with my attorney, who was a friend, I shouldn't say attorney, and his wife. And we were sitting in a restaurant. It was out on Long Island. It was the Moksha Bookshop. It was one of the Indian restaurants out on Long Island. Santosha or something, I think it was called. Anyway, and she's sitting there, and she says to me, "Oh, I had this great dream about you." And I said, "Really?" And we're all making jokes like, "Yeah, how great was it?" And she goes, "I was in California. You ever been to California?" And at that point, I've never been to California. I said, "No, I haven't been out there yet." And this was going back, probably in the 1980s. And she goes, "And I was on the beach, walking along the beach." And she said, "It was in Ensenada." And I look up, and there's a cliff. And I see you walking along the edge of the cliff with this man in an orange robe. And she goes, "As a matter of fact, I don't know if you're aware of it, but there's an ashram there. There's a guy named Yogananda, and that was his ashram." And I saw you walking along, and I'm sitting in the restaurant staring at her. And she goes, "And you're walking along the cliff, arm in arm with this man in an orange robe, look like Yogananda. And I'm screaming at you, and you can't hear me because the wind is blowing and up on top." And she proceeded to describe that dream exactly the way it happened from the beach. So I said, when did this happen?" And she says, oh, like a month ago. Meanwhile, I had the experience like maybe 4 or 5 months earlier,
Wow.
6 months earlier. So that's why when I got out there and I got to that place, Sherry was doing some photography. She's an amazing photographer.
We know.
Yeah, I know. It's just the work she does.
Every single person on both sides of the family, just for viewers, has an incredible gift, and that's how we started the show. And they don't hold on to it; they share it, you know, and that's why their lives have meaning as well as purpose. It's amazing how every kid in your family, in all sides, they have something unique. We talk about past lives. You have, in this one lifetime, hundreds of lives that you've lived. I'm wondering, yeah.
No, the Hindu astrologer had given me most of my past lives, and the last one was in England in 1790. And it's funny because I had already been there. I had this urge to go to England. This is before I met the astrologer. So we go down, and with my cousin and my mom and dad, I think they met us there because I remember being with my cousin, and after my parents showed up the next day, we were staying on Kensington High Street, and this is 1978, before the Jubilee. And so I check into the hotel, and he says, "Are you going to be here next Sunday?" I said, "No, we're leaving Saturday." He goes, "Well, you got to go to the flea market at Petticoat Lane or whatever it was." He said, "It's only on Saturday or whatever." So I opened up the door, threw my backpack and everything in, and he says, "Just take the bus to the underground." And we just go outside, and we're standing there, and the double-decker bus pulls up, and we get on the bus, and the guy comes over and says, 37 pence. And I open up my hands, and I'm taking the money, and because it's really just counting up 37. And my cousin is just staring at the money. And I'm like, and I just pick the 37 pence up or whatever it was, and I give it to the guy. And she's kind of looking at me like, So then I said, "This is it. This is our stop." And she looks at me and she goes, "How do you know?" I said, "No, this is it." We get off and we go down the stairs to the underground. And we get on the train and we're going and we're sitting there. It's like, "Oh, this is it. This is the stop." Now, I'm not even, it's like being on the Long Island Railroad going to Penn Station. I don't even think. You're a Long Islander. You don't even think. You can fall asleep on
second nature. Yeah.
So we get there and we're walking up the stairs. And we get to the top, and everybody is going this way. And I said, "No, I think it's to the right." And she goes, so we get up and we make like a right, and we walk a few feet, and there we are at the flea market, and it's the Cockneys, and it was okay. I did it. So we're walking and we're walking and we're walking, and I don't know how long we were walking for, but I'm in kind of a rundown area. Now, this is back in the 70s. By now, that area has probably been up in, like, going to the East Village back in the 70s was not like going to the East Village now. Now it's a she place to be. Anyway, and I see a cop, or they call him a Bobby, and I walk up to him and I says, "I got to get back to Kensington High Street." And he looks at me and he goes, "You're a Yankee." I'm like, "A Yankee?" I said, "Yeah, I'm from New York." He goes, "Well, this isn't the sightseeing area. You're really not in a good neighborhood." Right. I said, "No, this is kind of a really cool neighborhood." I'm like, it's like walking around like the East Village. You're a New Yorker. You're used to, it's just something really cool about it. So we chatted for a few minutes, and I said, "We just got here." And he told me places I should go. He said, "Well, if you go up here and go up this block, you're going to see the Thames, and you'll see Tower Bridge." I said, "Fine." And I said, "From there, we'll get back home." So we had a great trip. 4 months later, I'm sitting, or maybe even longer than that, I'm sitting in the office of a Hindu astrologer in Manhattan, and he had done my life reading. And when you're done listening to it, it's recorded before you get there. You give your birthday in advance. Then you go into a room and have the consultation. So he's sitting there looking at the ephemeris, and he said, "You have a lot of Hindu and Egyptian incarnations, and you've done a lot of these." And I'm listening to him, and he goes, and Walton, he goes, "Your last incarnation, though, was in England in 1790. And I'm doing poker face, which I hate when people do this to me. I go, "Really?" He goes, "You need to go there in this lifetime." And I said, "Been there. You need to go to London." I said, "I've been there." He goes, "You need to go to the east end of London."
Wow.
And that's where I was. I was in the East End. I go,
God.
"I've been here." And he goes, "Not a pretty sight." I go, "No, it's kind of," he goes, "That's where you lived." And he described the neighborhood that I would, but of course, in those days, it was affluent or whatever. And if you remember when I did the past life regression, twice I tried to get a TV show, and the networks have shot it down. They'd rather have the Housewives of Schmageggyville than, Anyway, we were shooting all day, and Sherry came to pick me up, and the producer looked and didn't know it was my wife, and he said, "Oh, is she another?" I said, "No, it's my wife." "Well, let's hypnotize her." I go, "My wife?" So she sits down, and I hypnotized her, and I thought she was teasing me because she went right out, and she's going on, and this is on YouTube. I think if you Google on YouTube, if you search Glenda Past Life, the video is probably still up.
I look at it all the time. One of my favorite videos.
Sherry has a little bob, ball hecker.
I love it.
And what happened was we were filming it, and she was in England.
Yeah.
And what year is it? And now, meanwhile, you got to realize there are people behind the cameras. So she says, it's it's 60. What year is it? Oh, I'm at the Spring Festival. She's going through the whole thing. Of course, that was edited. And she's giving details. And the one guy is on a computer Googling what she's saying, checking the dates. So he holds up a piece of paper and says, "Ask her about this." And I ask her that. And as we're getting live, on time, live feedback, and they're telling me, "Ask her about this, ask her." And I'm asking her the questions that they're holding up in front of me. And she's just nonchalantly going, "I'm 15. It's, 1625. Oh, I'm 31. Oh, and she's giving me years. Now, if you take the calculator out, it's exactly adding up." Wow. So that I found really interesting.
Very evidential. And, I know that's how you work with mediumship, and past life stuff. It's kind of like you're in a courtroom and you want to build a case of eternity, and you need just these different pieces of material to kind of have that case.
Right.
And whether that's, connecting to a loved one or afterlife. I know a lot of my viewers in today, obviously, we all have lost, someone, no matter who we are. It's just thousands of people have died before me.
And we're all going to go also.
We're all going to go. The person who is on the cover of my book, Alison Dubois, wrote a book along the lines like, we are their heaven, essentially. Like sometimes we view our loved ones in the afterlife, but really the lives that we live are their heaven. You've read for thousands of people. When you kind of sit quietly, obviously there's subjective messages, but what's the overall messages that loved ones on the other side want us to hear?
That people have to realize also, you're not when you're not any smarter when you die than you are when you're here. And I think it was John Edward one night made a funny comment. John has just got away, and he said, "Oh, stupid here, stupid there," which is something I just remember him saying. Just because I got to tell people, just because somebody's dead doesn't mean they know everything. I love when people say to me, "Well, ask my grandfather, should I change? Should I quit that job?" And I'll always go, "Would you have asked him when he was alive?" And then go, "Oh, heck no." I would. Well, you're not any brighter when you pass on, but I think they want us to know that they're not gone. And that's the whole thing, that their existence, energy is not destroyed. It's only transferred. If you burn a piece of paper, God knows I was terrible in high school. I don't know, does it go from carbon to hydrogen to heat? But you don't destroy the energy.
That was by Albert Einstein, right?
Yeah.
It's funny when you listen to the scientists now. They almost sound like metaphysical, spiritual teachers. What they were saying, they were like you. They were so ahead of their times.
It's so interesting, but so it's just that like that they want us to know that they're there, and they do exist. Right now in the room where you're sitting is 106.7 or 105.3 or 89.9, and all these radio stations run, and Netflix is on, and DirecTV is on. Now it's in the room. When you turn on a radio, it doesn't find that frequency 10 miles away and bring it in. It's already in the room where you are. So imagine all of these conversations are going on, and you're tuning them in. Years ago, I used to be part of like a radio group. It wasn't a ham radio, but we used, for most people, think of it as like radio. So when I wanted to get into it, my friend said, "Well, why don't you listen to us talk?" And so he gets me the scanner. Now, in those days, it wasn't digital cordless phones, and we didn't really have the cell phones we do today. And this scanner would pick up all these frequencies, and it was actually an open band, which means I could pick up everything. And I'm sitting there in my house, and I'm turning the knob, and I'm hearing the police department, the fire department, radio stations. All of a sudden, I hear my neighbor talking on a cordless phone. Then I hear something else. And I'm sitting in my room going, all of these conversations are in the air.
Mm.
And my antenna is picking them up. So think about it. All of these radio stations and movies and everything are on right now, but we just don't hear them. So until we tune in that frequency. Now, my brain cannot tune in 106.7, so I have to use an AM radio or FM radio. But the spirit plane is just that. It's a frequency or dimension. Your ears and eyes cannot hear it or see it. They just don't go that high. But the real you that animates you can go that high because it is spirit encased in a body. In order for you to live in this world, it's like going into a deep sea diving suit. You put on the suit, you go underwater, you need an oxygen tank and you need a suit. You're not that suit. Imagine a person born in an underwater suit and they've never seen themselves. And then one day we pull them out and we bring them above the water. So it's a situation where it's already there. You're just becoming aware of it. Wow. And of course, frequency, when you start to blow things up, if you look at, you start blowing everything up.
It's basically nothing.
That's what it was.
The things that we view as real and physical are actually the furthest thing.
Well, people did. You blow something up and you see, let's say you take your hand and you blow it up, and after a while you're going to see pores of skin, and you blow that up, and particles, and you get down to atoms. And then you blow up the atom, and it's 75% space and 25% particle. Now, forgive me to anybody who's a scientist, because I am not. My son, my oldest son, would know this stuff. And then, then there's electrons and protons, where you blow them up, and all you see is 25% particle, 75% space. Then you get electrons and photons, and then you blow them up, and you see 25% particle, 75% space. Then you blow that up, and you get mesons, and then I think the last particle, I guess, is a quark. I think and they blow that up, and it's just energy. Nothing is solid, and this is amazing. Yeah,
I mean, we're running close to the time. I'm wondering for you. There's a lot of people that I know, who are mediums in the metaphysical industry, who have a very hard time finding balance. They feel like they're too caught up in one world. You're the perfect example of someone who really is immersed in the spiritual, but also the physical. You have your passions, your drumming, your motorcycle. How do you cultivate that balance?
I don't want to consider it a job, but like today, I'm retired. So a couple of mornings a week, I will still speak with people. But it's like when the headset comes off, and I usually try to keep one space. Well, in this house, I was given one room by my wife, and it's my music room, and all my drums. But I have a little desk here, and I sit here. And when I'm done now, I have a rehearsal to go to tonight in a little bit of time, and I just go click, just like I'm watching a movie, and I shut it off, and I move on to the next thing. I'm able to do it.
Is that like kind of like cord cutting, like releasing things? I know a lot of mediums get very sick when they take on all this chi energy, and I noticed they have a lot of but you're someone who's always in pristine shape.
In the beginning, I found that I would be exhausted after one or two readings.
It's like running a 5K, I hear.
Yeah, and then after a while, you run it to the point. The funny thing is, it's I don't talk about it. The people in my town don't even know what I do. And somebody just recently emailed the office, and they said, I think I live in the same town as him, and they live in the same community. I think they live on the block. I'm down here, and people just know me as a drummer. I'm not looking for fame and fortune. And now that I'm retired, I speak to a few people. I've been doing this for 45 years. I'm done with it. And I've been playing music for longer than that. There's a point where you just get to the point you go, okay, I've done it so many times. We all have to find our own path with it, and whether it's a book or whatever it is. And sometimes it's that when people say, what did it for you? And I could say the autobiography of yoga, and I actually gave it, I think, to Sherry or something. And I know she didn't even get through. Like some people will go, I couldn't get into that. Well, something, there were books that I tried to read, and they just were like Chinese to me. And then all of a sudden, years later, I look at it and it starts speaking to me. So when you're ready for it to teach, what do they say? When you're ready, the teacher appears.
When the student is ready, to teach.
Yeah. So it's just, but like I said, you're just peeling away layer upon layer. That's what people have to keep remembering. You're already there, and you're taking these layers down, and that's what it is.
Yeah. I mean, my theory is the most spiritual thing that we could do is to live while we live and make the most of what's in front of us, this life, because that is what we carry over in the afterlife. Our
Well, that's what
passion, hobbies.
Eckhart speaks about, that, like just being in the moment. And that's what it is. It's just being in
Be
one
here now.
situation.
Yeah.
That's it. That was the whole thing with it. So, yeah, it's, and then listen, I could be out of here tomorrow. Maybe I'll stay. My mom made it to 90, for whatever. And you come back, then you go, then you come back. And it's a process. But each experience, you come back and play another role. And then each role eventually, you see an actor, they do Othello, then they're going to do a comedy. And that's what it is. You just do all these different roles. So it's interesting.
Yeah. Well,
but it's normal to me.
My greatest joy in you is our society falls in love with the limelight. And we're taught that that's happiness, the spotlight. And for you, you're someone who has fallen in love and connected to their inner light. And that's what you live your life by. The inner light versus the spotlight, where everyone is chasing fame and fortune. And for you, you really connect to this inner light, but you're about the craft. You're a man of principle. And just
I like the music. I mean, don't get me wrong. I love playing and performing, but it's not about, it's never been fame. And I was so proud of my son. I went to see Brandon and he was, he's been like selling out. I think they're going to Asia next week or something. I know, I just saw the tour dates and they're going to be in like Singapore.
This is with Yvette Young.
Yeah, with Yvette. And I went to see him. They were on the last tour, not this one. They hit they hit Florida up in Tampa. And we went up and it was a sold out show. And my guitarist came with me and we went up there in Sherry. And at the end of the show, people were coming up, and Brandon is so humble, and he just came off stage, and he's just sitting there, spending all this time with these people, and like he's like, "What kind of guitar do you play?" And like I was so happy because I'm like, like he's the kind of person who could be the number one musician, and it's just he's got that, and I'm like, I did my job.
He was raised the right way. It's like
and I mean Connor as well, of course, and just, but it's but
it's like our favorite son in New York, Derek Jeter. They asked him, "Do you ever reflect on your greatness as a Yankee while you were playing?" He says, "No, I just go on the field and I do my thing. I don't think anything of it. It's just what I see that."
Chris does it. My son Chris here is like, if somebody rings a doorbell, it's like, "Can I get you some food?" And I'm always like, I always feel like, what, he's just got this kindness that I don't know where it comes. They just, but
you raised them well.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah. So Glenn, for anyone who's interested, in a mediumship reading, hypnosis session, where could they find you?
Well, right now, hypnosis I haven't been doing, and I believe years ago. Yeah, because what happened was, I believe in Florida, I have to double check. I think you have to have a BA in psych or better to practice.
Right. I don't want to get you.
I'm not sure. No, I don't remember. But they can go to glendove.com. There is a phone number and an email address. Although the website has to be updated because it still has me. I got to get it taken. I changed because it still has the office.
I checked it out today. It's still very nice. It's better than the other one. I remember there was a change.
Well, but I think it might still show like the Healing Grotto was something. But so I'm working on phone, FaceTime, Zoom, and I very few sessions. I do a few sessions each week, and I know like right now the office in New York called, and they said, well, you book through October, and I'm like, well, I don't know what I'm doing beyond that because we may be taking trips and traveling. So every couple of months, I know I say, okay, I'll call up and say, now you can book November. I know when I'm going to be away. But if you call, be patient, and we get cancellations. I've had people call, and one lady called up, and what happened was, my secretary just got off the phone with the cancellation, and this lady called me. She goes, well, I just got a cancellation. I got you on the phone. And it turned out to be her deceased husband's birthday. Like she goes, I'm trying to get an appointment. She goes, well, we have one opening, and she gave the date, and she goes, I wanted it was my husband's birthday. Like, there's a chance. But they can, it's the 516-223-2567. And they can go on glendove.com. And there's an email address and there's a phone number, and you can just leave a message, and Karen handles all the calls. As I said, I'm not doing a lot of work anymore. I get so many people, but I'm like, I've been doing it for so long, so I'm just focusing on my music, and with the help of a Jake, I'm hoping I will finally get this book done. Robin Shortino in New York has helped me out. Rob used to sit and listen to me talk, and she would scribble everything down, and she's got some great stories. So I do have to get it together one day.
I titled this show The Motorcycle because I know that's one of your biggest passions outside of drumming is motorcycles. So you have to have a trademark on that. I don't want, that's your thing.
When people come to the house to do like sometimes repair or something, I open the garage, and I have a 3-car garage, and I open up the one garage and they just stop. and I have like a Ducati and a BMW and a Triumph, and my wife has a Harley. We have, and like they did, and there's 9 bikes in there right now. One is my son, and it's just like it looks like, and I'm like, yeah, I guess. Like I get into things and I get into them. I've always been that way.
Everyone has
But I do
things.
love riding. So
yeah. Well, thank you guys for listening. Thank you, Glenn.
Thank you.
Glenn to me is family, so thank you so much for coming on and sharing your incredible stories, wisdom, insight. I am just blessed to know you and call you family, or as we say, mishpacha. That's a word that we'll understand in Hebrew. Glenn will probably know that word better than I do.
But all my Israeli incarnations.
Yeah, no, but Glenn is so family. He's just absolutely brilliant, and I'm just blessed.
Well, thank you, and thank everybody for listening to this. And as I said, everybody has to find it their own way. Some people need to go up into the mountains, and some people, and it doesn't matter how you do. I always tell people, it doesn't matter what kind of food you eat, Chinese, Mexican, Italian, Greek. It all goes in and breaks down to carbs and proteins. Some are flashier, some are quiet. And the idea is as long as you get there, it doesn't matter how you get there. And listen and read. And that's what it is. No, I thank you. So
thank you to my viewers. Please make sure to share your comments, share this video. It will change lives, I promise. And for those of you who haven't yet checked out my channel, feel free to browse it, subscribe it, share it, and we'll see you next week. Glenn Dove. Been a pleasure. We'll have you on back again when you're available.
All right. Thanks so much. Have a good day.
Thank you. Well, that was just an amazing interview with my dear friend Glenn Dove. He shared just so many beautiful stories and how he really developed and nurtured his incredible gift of connecting to loved ones on the other side, and how he was able to kind of use the shake-up period and as a drummer in Ram Jam, he just followed his, inner calling. And he's just someone who we could all learn from, just in terms of listening to their own intuition, their inner calling, as well as connecting to the outer intuitive pulls. Just some incredible stories. And I just, love Glenn. He just has so much insight, and his brain is it's like a sports car. It goes so fast. There's so many different ideas, but it's just so filled with joy and insight. Please share our video that you did with Glenn. Thank you for joining my channel here on the Wisdom Jacob's Ladder. Next week, we will bring in our guest, Robert Ginsburg. And Robert is the co-founder of the Forever Family Foundation. And he will talk about how he's been able to use, evidential mediumship and science to help out a lot of families who dealing with loss and grief, and again, utilizing, similar to Elizabeth, like belief in grief and all these points of evidential connections to the hereafter to really be allowed in a safe space for people to really process their awareness of the afterlife, to hopefully bring it into this life. So you do not want to miss my next guest, Bob Ginsburg. Thank you all for tuning in. This was a great interview that we did with Glenn. More coming your way, and we'll see you next Wednesday when we upload my interview with Bob Ginsburg. I will also be available. My podcast will be available on other platforms such as Spotify, iTunes, and many more. So please stay tuned for my other interviews that are on a lot of other platforms. But it's been real. Keep on climbing the ladder, keep on expanding our awareness to higher frequencies and higher wisdom each and every day, and always being the artist of the mind and the heart. And hopefully some of this information could help you to really move the needle of your lives to a greater gear. Thank you very much. Talk soon. Be well. Many blessings.